All right, welcome to a special March Madness preview edition of Take Two. Um, we'll discuss our brackets, we'll discuss our Final Fours, we'll discuss who we think has a chance in the tournament. But first, I want to start with NFL free agency beginning and with a lot of signings that took place, a lot of focus on the Cleveland Browns acquired Odell Beckham Jr., one of the top wide receivers in the NFL, to go along with a lot of talent they have. A bunch of people think that the Browns, after years of misery and woe and just being horrible, are now, some saying, a Super Bowl caliber team. Because you got Odell Beckham, great player, Jarvis Landry, great player, Baker Mayfield, great quarterback, Myles Garrett, great defensive end, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt. The team is loaded. But what I would say is let's dial it back. You have a lot of talent on that team, but you don't have a team, really. You don't have a team that's going to gel. You don't have leadership. You have Baker Mayfield, ego. Odell Beckham Jr., ego. Jarvis Landry, ego. Nick Chubb, ego. Kareem Hunt.
I don't know if Kareem Hunt has an ego. He's more of just not a good
That's
guy.
the prize. You end up with a bunch of guys who aren't good teammates. You got Odell Beckham Jr. getting into fights with field goal nets. You got Jarvis Landry getting into fights with teammates. Kareem Hunt, the entire fiasco with him and the domestic violence issue last year that got him kicked off of his team.
Yep.
And Baker Mayfield, you got to pull it back on the guy. He had a good-ish year last year.
I would say better than that. I'd say
Better. I mean, he had a good rookie year, but I mean, he's nowhere near the best. He's not even the best quarterback in his division, let alone the best quarterback and anywhere close to the best quarterback in his conference. I mean, you're talking about a conference that has Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, Deshaun Watson, Phillip Rivers.
I don't think people are saying that he's better than them already.
And even in his division, Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, still better, I think, than Baker Mayfield at this stage in his career. So, are the Browns a playoff team next year? Probably.
Yeah, they almost were this year.
But a Super Bowl team, no way. I mean,
I agree. I don't think they're gonna go to the Super Bowl.
You have a bunch of raw talent and little to no actual guys who are going to step up and lead that team.
I'm gonna reserve my judgment until I see them play together and see how they meld with each other. But it is very possible that you're right, and this will not work at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a catastrophic season for them, but with people, we got all these players, like, Browns fans, we got all these great players, it's our year, you got to dial it back, because you look at teams with a bunch of great players on them, the most talented team doesn't always win. I mean, the Rams were probably the most talented team in football last year.
I'd say by far.
They had a super team. Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, Jared Goff, Todd Gurley, Brandon Woods, I think. I know Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods. Aqib Talib. That was a borderline super team. And they fell apart in the Super Bowl against a Patriots team that just was coached a little bit better.
And then you had...
just had a better scheme. Now, Sean McVay is an outstanding coach. But the point here is that raw talent doesn't always get you the win.
But the Patriots had Edelman. That's what you're forgetting.
That's true. They did have Edelman, who is
probably the worst Super Bowl MVP ever.
Malcolm Butler, possibly.
Yeah, but who knows?
Fun fact. Anyway, I think let's move on now. NCAA tournament starting soon. Just pretty much everybody is on board. A lot of people on board with Duke to win the whole thing. So I want to hear your take. Your national champion. Who's in your Final Four?
It's the Zion train right now. Coming back from his injury, he's played very well, and the Duke looks like a competent team again. Not to take anything away from R.J. Barrett or Cam Reddish, they looked really like a completely different team, almost confused when he went down, And since he's been back, they've performed so much better. And I think they're probably the consensus favorite at this point, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to pick against them.
I mean, they have 2 lottery picks, high lottery picks at that, probably the 1 and 2 overall picks in the NBA draft with Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett. And then they have Cam Reddish, who is...
streaky, we'll call it.
Yeah, that's putting it lightly. He's probably the most inconsistent player I think I've ever seen. One of them. Like, it's so odd watching him play. Because sometimes he'll light it up, and then sometimes he won't. And when I mean he won't, he really doesn't. I think his field goal percentage is like 35%, something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, his field goal percentage is low. I think that's right, 35%,
something
which
like
is
that.
Not remotely what you want.
The big problem with Duke is, in my eyes, is they're 3 stars. None of them are great shooters, really. I mean, you know, R.J. Barrett sometimes is, but then he sometimes isn't. It's that whole team just has a shooting problem, we'll call it.
Yeah, but I mean, they have people who can shoot the ball that aren't the 3 superstars. I mean, I think you look at a lot of successful basketball teams. You have those those elite 3-and-D players that we love to talk about. Got to make it a personal goal to bring up elite 3-and-D players in every podcast so I can say and talk about Shane Battier.
Pretty much.
That's the goal. Because every episode of this podcast, find a way to talk about Shane Battier. But moving on, I think what you're saying about Duke is 100% true. I think they're the consensus favorite. They're the most talented team. They have the first and second best player. They have the best coach. It's hard to bet against that.
It really is. I mean, they don't have too many major weaknesses other than, I mean, like I said, sometimes their shooting is not great. I mean, but they definitely have some elite shooters that aren't their stars, like you said.
Yeah. Now, we can play devil's advocate for a moment and say, okay, one problem Duke has had is they've been inconsistent. When Zion, I mean, they've had games nearly losing to Wake Forest, an inch away from losing that game. They've lost some games this year. They've been in close games that you wouldn't expect them to be in. So they're not invincible. So one thing we can look at is what teams have the potential to beat Duke to win a national title. One team I look at is Rick Barnes' Tennessee Volunteers. They've been more inconsistent than Duke.
I would definitely say so. They've been up and down. It's odd.
Definitely, they've been up and down. They've been up and down at points. They an embarrassing loss to Auburn in the SEC championship game.
Complete
capitulation in that game. They looked horrible, but the night before to pull off an 8-point comeback in about 2 minutes against a fantastic Kentucky team. That speaks volumes to what the team is capable of, and Rick Barnes has done a fantastic job there. And we talk about Duke's front court, Zion Williamson, R.J. Barrett, the 2 most unstoppable forwards in the country. What I would say, if there is any set of forwards that could even hope to compete with them, cause any sort of matchup problem for them, that would be Grant Williams and Admiral Schofield on Tennessee. Because they're 2 excellent players. They're not as good as RJ or Zion, but Schofield has size and a similar build to Zion, and Grant Williams is a similar player to RJ Barrett in the way they play small forward and the way that they play that position. They're both fantastic players. So if there's any team I think that could match up with Duke on a good day, it would be Tennessee. So that's my take. If not Duke, then I think Tennessee has a chance.
My biggest problem with Tennessee is I feel they're gonna some way find a way to lose long before they have to face Duke.
Yeah. Well, if they face Duke, it would be in the national championship.
I know. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I think they'll find some way to lose to somebody that they should be better than.
Yeah, it's certainly possible.
And you know, consistency is the big factor with the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
And there hasn't been too many teams so far this year that I've seen that have been really consistent. But when you're talking inconsistency, the first thing that comes to my mind is Tennessee.
Yeah. So if not,
besides Kansas.
Yeah. If not Duke, who do you think has a shot?
I think UNC has a little bit of a chance.
Beat Duke once.
They did,
Beat Duke twice? Oh no.
No, they played last Friday and they lost by 1.
Mm-hmm.
Because Kobe White, their guard, I believe, played pretty bad. He shot like 20-something% from the field. Wasn't very good. But Cam Reddish wasn't very good for Duke either. But,
yeah.
That's not unusual. But I think a lot of people are really hyping up Virginia again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really trust Virginia after...
It's hard to trust Virginia after last year.
Yeah. Oof.
I mean, I picked them consensus best team in the country, played elite defense. I mean, there was a game where they held Clemson to 6 points and a half last season.
But they couldn't clinch up UMBC.
Yeah, no, they couldn't. They didn't just lose to Maryland, Baltimore County. They got blown out in that game. So it is really hard to trust Virginia in this tournament. I don't have them going very far.
It's like whenever Kansas is a good team, I don't trust them usually because they somehow manage to lose. Like that happened like for 8 years straight until last year. They would always lose to a team that they shouldn't lose to.
Yeah, I mean last year you had
Last year I understand them losing to Villanova
because last year's Villanova team, which is excellent.
They were unstoppable.
I got it wrong out of the gate because I thought it would be Virginia all the way. But then I think I was watching Villanova's Sweet 16 game, and just watching them play, I remember sitting back and saying, no one's going to beat Villanova. They're last year, they were just too good.
And they massacred Kansas last year.
Yeah, they really, Michigan had no chance. I mean, nobody had a chance against that team. So this year, that's kind of what I view Duke, everybody's viewing Duke as right now, because I mean that Villanova team was an elite shooting team. This Duke team is just raw talent, and I was talking about earlier with the Browns. Raw talent doesn't always win you games in football, but it does win you games in basketball.
To a degree.
A lot of the time. I mean, if you look at the NBA Finals the past 20 years, there's not that many teams that have won an NBA championship that haven't been consensus like super teams. You think?
I'd say the Dallas Mavericks.
The Dallas Mavericks are one in 2011
because Dirk was kind of old and their starting point guard was an old Jason Kidd.
The Pistons in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I would say so.
Wasn't really.
The thing about the Pistons though is they were smart.
Yeah.
Chauncey Billups was an incredibly smart player, and they had one of the best defenses
of all time
since the 1989 Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, but that's just the thing about the sport of basketball, is having a star player, having multiple stars is what is going to win you championships, and that's the point here. That's what Duke has. Duke has 2 world-class players. They have a great coach. They are going to be really tough to stop. They have an off night that somebody might be able to catch them. I look at Michigan State. I think that they would match up in the Elite Eight. Michigan State's a really, really good basketball team.
Yeah.
So if there's one, that would be a game I think Duke needs to watch out for, because if Duke doesn't play their best basketball, they could very easily get beat in that game.
Yeah, the thing is with Duke that I'm most concerned about is they can't get complacent. They cannot just be, they have to take their opponent seriously.
Yeah, and that goes for everyone in any
especially
sport.
Duke though, because they're so hyped up and they're so. I honestly think that's part of the reason why Virginia lost last year.
Yeah,
they didn't take it seriously.
You got to be able to close out the hype,
and you have to come out right at the gates, because if that momentum keeps swinging in the other direction, sometimes you can't come back from that.
Yeah, that's what happened to Virginia last year. I kept thinking they're going to catch on, they're going to end their complacency, and they're going to storm back, but they didn't.
They didn't.
So
yeah.
you have to, in all sports, not just basketball, but with March Madness, one of the most unforgiving tournaments in sports, where you can't lose a game.
Right.
So they're just going to have to bring their A game. If they bring their A game, I think you and I are in agreement. Duke is the best team in this tournament with the best shot to win. But they don't call it...
Definite.
They don't... I mean, upsets happen for a reason.
Yeah, that's why it's interesting.
They don't call it March Madness for nothing.
I mean, that's part of the reason why a lot of people prefer March Madness, the whole March Madness system, to almost any other playoff
Just because
system.
it's unforgiving.
Yeah, that's when you compare it to the NBA playoff system. It's usually the better team that's going to win.
Yeah,
because it's at least 4 games.
Here you can have Loyola Chicago in the Final Four. You can have
Right.
a dark horse South Carolina team in the Final Four like 2 years ago. So
Yeah.
anything can happen. Anything goes. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. I look forward to watching my bracket completely crumble and fall apart like it does every year because I don't pick these games very well, but we'll see what happens. That'll be it for this episode of Take 2, our March Madness predictions. Pretty consensus.
Duke,
We're going to run with
maybe.
everybody else and say we've both got Duke to win it. So that'll be it. And once we get into this tournament, we'll reconvene and assess it as it goes on. We'll take you every step of the way through March Madness.
And if
here
next
in
time we
Take
talk
2.
and Duke is already out,
We'll have to eat crow then. But that'll be...
we'll be a little embarrassed.
Yep.
Don't disappoint us, Duke.
That'll be it for this episode of Take 2. Thank you all for listening.